Everybody hit continue. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our presentation where we're going to discuss the female senior level administrators' experiences of gender bias in collegiate athletics. My name is Rob Harden, and joining me today are my co-authors, Lizzie Taylor, Allison Smith, and Jessica Siegel. And so first, we'll just do a general overview of women in leadership positions in college athletics. And so we'll start with just looking in general that women hold about 22% of all the athletic director positions in college athletics, and that's at the divisions 1, 2, and 3 level. And then but that has been improving, as you can see from the chart from 2012 up until 2019, which is the most recent data from the NCAA. There's been a net gain of about 40 women moving into athletic director positions. So that's been a positive development overall. And then if you break it down to Division I, which is the least represented group, and with having women in athletic director positions, as you can see, it drops down where you're down below 15% of women holding athletic director positions in Division I. And then, but there has been improvement. As you can see in 2012, only 33 women held athletic director positions in Division I, and that number had increased to 49 by 2019. And again, that's the most recent data from the NCAA. And then if you break it down by the four separate divisions within Division I, you can see the Division I with no football, FCS, FBS non-autonomy, and FBS autonomy. You can see that in the so-called Power 5 and Group of 5 that women have the least representation in athletic director positions. Is only 10 out of 130 schools have women in leadership positions as the athletic director. But that does improve at the FCS and level and at the no football level. And then when you look in Division II, you can still see those numbers are still a little low, where you're looking again at about 15% total. And then moving on to Division III, there's a big jump up. Well, actually, we can look historically at Division II. And you can see that number has been pretty steady since 2012 to 2019, as the number has been right around between 50 and 60 throughout the past several years. But then at the Division III level, women have the most representation in athletic director positions. As you can see, out of the 450, you can see there's approximately 142, which is a huge representation for women at this level. And then that number has also steadily increased during the past few years, as we've added a net gain of about 20 women in athletic director positions at the Division III level. And then, to no surprise, that the other group that we looked at in this sample, if you look at assistant athletic director positions, you can see that the total number has increased of people holding that title, but there's not been an overwhelming majority of men gaining those positions. As you can see, it's been almost split, as we now have 991 women in 2019 holding the title of assistant athletic director, which is an increase of over 300 from 2012. And then if you look at the title of associate athletic director, you can still, the same phenomena is existing, as both numbers have increased, but women have increased as well, as we have a net gain of over 300 women holding the title of associate athletic directors from 2009 to from 2012. And then the other group that we looked at, to no surprise, women hold all the senior women administrator designations within the NCAA. And so next we'll look at the barriers to career mobility, and then Lizzie Taylor will walk us through this part of the presentation.
Thanks, Rob. So previous research has noted a plethora of challenges for women in the sport industry, especially those working in collegiate athletics. And what we've found through a lot of our research is that these challenges are not particular to one position. So they include challenges associated with women in coaching positions or athletic administration positions. And so we really have found that these issues are systemic and can be found across the entire athletic department, as noted by similar experiences from women in graduate assistant positions all the way up to women as conference commissioners. So for this project, we utilized the ecological intersectional model as a guiding theoretical framework. And the ecological intersectional model is based on the ecological systems model, intersectionality, and power. So at the top level, or the highest level, is the sociocultural level of the ecological systems model. And this examines the existence of gender traditional norms and stereotypes and the role they play in the potential success of women. So ideals like women are not as capable of leaders, unequal assumptions of confidence, of competence, and the fact that women are most often seen as invaders within leadership positions in college athletics are really prevalent within the sociocultural level. In a male-dominated industry like sport, the organizational level can be influenced as well through things like access and treatment discrimination in terms of discriminatory hiring practices and organizational values, which can negatively impact a woman's ability to enter into or be successful in the sport industry. So women may have challenges getting into the sport industry, being hired through things like homologous reproduction or principle of similarity, where we know that we like to hire people who look like us. So if majority of athletic directors are men, it's going to be more challenging for women and folks of color to get hired into an athletic department. We also know that in a very demanding industry such as college athletics, work family policies are really, really important to ensure that all employees can better balance the time that they spend with their family and the time that they spend at work. So if an organization doesn't have family-friendly policies, it makes it very challenging for women to be successful. At the interpersonal level, we look at the presence of relationships with one's family, colleagues, and other social networks. And as noted in previous research, the nature of the relationship, whether it's positive or negative, will have an impact on women in different ways. For example, a positive social relationship like mentorship or sponsoring can offer support to women in college athletics, where a lack of support and limited social networks can lead to negative workplace experiences such as burnout and feelings of isolation. Additionally, support from family, so having a partner who supports the work that these women are doing is really, really important as well. And looking at experiences with things like a good old boys network, which has been found in college athletics, also impacts the interpersonal level of the ecological systems model. And the inclusion of intersectionality allows this model to highlight the complexities associated with race, sexual orientation, and social class that exist within the demographic of being a woman. So a woman's intersectional identities, something like how gender identity intersects with race, sexual orientation, age, class, and other identities can influence individual level experiences and how a woman makes sense of them. So including intersectional identities allows for an additional layer of analysis within the ecological systems model, which is very important because every woman is different and her experiences are going to differ based on her multiple identities.
So what we wanted to do specifically was look at the idea of the impact that gender bias is having on the career mobility and how that may fit into the model. And so this is just a quick diagram of the gender bias higher order factors. And we looked at male privilege, disproportionate constraints, insufficient support, devaluation, hostility, and acquiescence. And underneath each of those higher order factors are lower order factors that make up each of those factors. And so we'll get into more detail about that when we get into the results section. So then the purpose of our study was to examine the prevalence of gender bias among women who hold senior level positions in NCAA member athletic departments. We wanted to use the gender bias scale, which I mentioned, situate the results within the ecological intersection model, and then look at some demographic factors and how that may influence their experience within intercollegiate athletics. So then our methodology, we looked at female senior level administrators, which included athletic directors and senior women administrators in our sample. We looked at all three NCAA divisions, and that gave us a total sample of close to 1,400 women. And then we used a gender bias scale for women leaders. It contained 47 statements. It was on a 1 to 5 rating scale, and it was either anchored by strongly disagree, strongly agree, or never or always. And again, those are the 6 higher order factors that we were examining, and those were made up of the lower order factors as well. So then data collection, IRB approval, we looked at publicly available email addresses. We had a potential of 1,100 respondents, who we emailed. We sent 2 reminder emails, and we ended up with 247 usable responses. And then looking at our results, so just quickly from a demographic standpoint, and these are the demographics that we used to look at the intersectionality aspect of it. As you can see, we were fairly split with single and never, or people that were not in a relationship and people were in a relationship, and same thing with children in the household. So those were the demographics that we looked at when we got into seeing how it impacted intersectionality, as I mentioned. And then looking at our results, you can see the items highlighted in red are the ones that were 2.5 or higher on the 1 to 5 scale. So those were disproportionate constraints, insufficient support, devaluation, and hostility. And then looking at the lower order factors, the ones highlighted in green are the ones that were above the 2.5 mean scale on that. And a couple of things that really kind of jump out are, especially within the disproportionate constraints or the constrained communication and unequal standards, as well as when you look at salary inequity under devaluation as well. And then looking at when we started doing some of the comparisons, and so we compared women who had children and women who do not have children. You can see there's 3 differences, significant differences when we ran the t-test. That came under devaluation, hostility, and acquiescence. And then our next thing, we looked at people who were single and never married and those in a long-term relationship, which included those that were married. And again, we had 2 differences with devaluation and hostility. And then we'll get into some more of that when we get into the some of the open-ended comments. And so moving on to the discussion, and Allison and Jessica will walk us through the discussion part.
All right, so along with the statistical analysis and the results from that side of the study, we also had 28 pages of open-ended comments. So we coded all through those 28 pages of comments, specifically using the higher order factors to lead our coding process. And so answering this overarching question of how has gender impacted your experiences working in collegiate athletics, our highest percentage of comments that related to the higher order factors was male privilege, and then followed by other, which there were things as simple as, not responding or writing NA, all the way up to positive experiences and discussing that in that other category. So we'll give some more detail about that in the next couple of slides.
So we wanted to give examples of what these higher order factors looked like in a qualitative context. What we wanted to underscore was that although not all of these were statistically significant on the quantitative side of the study, that women are still experiencing this, even if it didn't happen or it didn't show significance on the quantitative side. So our first quote is an example of acquiescence. This is sort of a reluctance and a submissive, gosh, I just stumbled over my words, sorry guys. Being a little bit submissive or a reluctant acceptance is what I was trying to say before. So this quote is from a woman who says, "I feel like a bother when I voice my feelings or advocate for others." We have devaluation here. Largely when we were coding for devaluation, we had women discussing their experiences with lack of pay. With this quote, this woman is talking about feeling like she's not being allowed in the room or to be part of the conversation. She doesn't feel like she should be there or she needs to be there. That's how she's made to feel. And then the next one we have is disproportionate constraints. When we were coding for this one, several examples came up of having womanly duties or tasks that were nurturing in nature, tasks that you would specifically give to a woman that you wouldn't ask a male athletic director to do. So she talks about buying a cake, decorating rooms, doing things that men could obviously handle, but it is under the woman's purview, at least in this athletic department. We didn't have a ton of codes under the hostility higher order factor, which is a good thing. But I think this speaks to the gender bias that isn't as explicit anymore. These are implicit biases that come up. So we're not having this explicit hostility, although it did happen on a few occasions where women had comments like this. I've had males comment on my sexuality, weight, and overall appearance. We also coded for insufficient support, and we would see evidence of this in comments such as, I often do not feel supported, mentored, or invested in. Lastly, we coded for male privilege, and under this higher order factor, we largely saw evidence of the male dominated culture. So things about the good old boys club, or feeling that they don't belong because it is a male culture. So for example, this woman talks about she is excluded from hanging out with her male coworkers because it is an exclusively male environment. And then our last code, we coded for other ones that, as Allison explained, it didn't fit into these higher order factors, and they were largely positive comments. And it spoke to the female leadership often. This woman talks about her current AD is a woman and she values me. She encourages me to speak up. She values my opinion. So when we had female leadership, we often also saw these positive comments related to their experience in their athletic department.
All right, so what does all of this mean and what are some larger implications from this study? So I think first and foremost, the presence of mentorship, networking, conferences needs to continue to happen in intercollegiate athletics. Particularly male athletic directors, if they are in positions of leadership, need to support and advocate for their female employees to be able to participate in conferences or networking opportunities or create mentorship programs within their athletic departments to change the kind of gender bias and the culture that we're seeing that's still prevalent in these spaces. Additionally, I think one point that really needs to be solidified here in our discussion is that the organization should be providing this support and resources, that it's not on the women exclusively to come up with ways to change their situation or to change their lives and move up the ladder within intercollegiate athletics. The responsibility is also on the organization itself to provide these kind of platforms for these women to move up, to move into leadership positions, and to sustain long-term in intercollegiate athletics. So this is, again, all of us that were involved in this study, and we would be happy to take any emails, questions, comments, concerns that you have about our presentation, and we appreciate you tuning in. Thanks so much.